I have a question for you this morning, and it's not a rhetorical question. I really want you to think about this. Why are you here? Why are you here this morning? Why did you choose to come here this morning? Is it because this is what you do on Sundays? You're supposed to go to church. Did your spouse tell you you were coming to church? Are you here because you want to praise and serve and honor God? Are you here because it's something out of fear? Why did you come here this morning? Take a second and really think about it. Why are you here? Now, whatever you formulated in your mind, in your head, I want you to crumple it up and kind of throw it away. You're here this morning because God appointed that you would be here. In His great love, He wanted you here for a reason. I have no idea what that reason is. It may be that God had something to say to you, whether it's in the songs or the prayers or in the class this morning, possibly in the lesson, who knows. It may be that you're supposed to get something out of the meal or out of the family forum. It might be, too, that it's not about you, that your presence here is to make an impact on somebody else. You are here because God wants you to be here. Open your Bibles to John chapter 7. John chapter 7 and verse 38. It says this, "Whoever believes in me, as the scripture has said, out of his heart will flow rivers of living water." Whoever believes in me, as the scripture said, out of his heart will flow rivers of living water. This is a promise that Christ has given, and it's not a promise to one specific person. This is one of the few promises that is actually to all people. He says, whoever. Whoever includes you, and it includes me. If we believe in Christ, out of our hearts will flow rivers of living water. I work with water on a day-to-day basis. That's what I'm a water chemist for a living. It's a lot more boring than it sounds. But anyway, water is essential to our being. It's essential to life. Back in the settlers' days, there were two main ways that they harvested water if they did not live close, if someone settled somewhere that didn't have a river close or a lake close or anything like that. And both of them involved digging a hole. So the first group of people, they would dig a hole down, and they would line the sides of the hole with rock, or they'd put pitch in it, something to seal it off, and it would be a place to catch water, and it was called a cistern. And a cistern is basically, like I said, it's a hole, it's lined, and it's made to contain and hold water. It's a storage device, which sounds great. It's a place to hold water. You don't have to walk miles and miles away to collect it and come back. But there's a few issues with a cistern. First, a cistern can develop a leak. And if your cistern has a crack in the bottom and there's a leak, the water that you collect is going to seep out, and it's not going to benefit anyone. Second, the water in a cistern is still. It's stagnant. And over time, stagnant water is a place where bacteria and other things come in and they say, hey, this is a party ground. And they'll grow in there and they'll flourish in there, and suddenly that water becomes something that is dangerous for you to drink. It might be somewhere that insects come and they'll lay their larvae in there. Larvae are gross. You don't want to drink that. Animals will go and they'll drink out of a cistern, and occasionally they slip in and fall, and you have a dead animal in your water supply. So a cistern, while it is useful at times, it can also be something that's dangerous if you're not careful with how you use it. Now, on the other side of that, people would dig a hole in the ground. But instead of digging it down and lining it with rocks and having a cistern, they'd keep on going. And they go down and down and down until they hit the waters that are within the earth. And we call this hole a well. Now, a well is different from a cistern because, you see, the water within a well is not something that just falls in, collected, and stays still. It's water that is renewed constantly. It's from a flowing underground river that 100% completely refreshes that water source all the time. And the interesting thing about a well is the more that you draw out of it, the more that it draws back up and it's replenished. So a cistern, once you drain the cistern dry, you have to wait for that to be filled back up. A well, the more you draw out of it, the more it's going to well up and more water will be there for use. This morning, what we're going to talk about is love and what that love means to us. Now, the love that God gives us, we have two choices with it. It's given to us, and we can either be a cistern where we hold God's love to ourselves, or we can become a well where the more that we give away, the more God pours into us. Now, the way love is shown, love is more than just a fact. It's more than just a feeling. In fact, it's not an emotion or anything like that. Love is a verb. And this morning we're going to look at how do we find our verb? How do we show love to others? We're constrained in our language. In Greek, there's several different words for love. And usually whenever you talk about love in English, we overuse words constantly. So I love my mother. I also love tacos. And I love going to the beach. And I love my parents' dog. And I love so many different things. But the love that I have for my mom and the love that I have for food are completely different. And we recognize that. So we're a little bit constrained, again, in the language that we have. Take time. I'm not going to go into studying love. In fact, go read the end of John, where Jesus has a conversation with Peter. But before you do that, come talk to me. I will give you a 5-minute Greek lesson. I'll give you a copy of that text in Greek, and then you can see how different forms of love are. We misuse the word agape love. A lot of people talk about that in church, and I'm afraid we've watered that down in the church even. That's not an easy love. Go read that verse. Go read that passage about Jesus in his conversation with Peter, and you'll see agape love is not something that we grasp firmly. Anyway, I digress. Sorry. Love is a big thing, though. It's a hard thing. And ladies, y'all are better at this than men are, typically. Love, we usually associate it with affection and being tender and kind-hearted. Men, we tend to have a little bit more of an issue with this because, we're called to be tough and macho and manly and all that stuff. But I'm going to challenge you this morning and tell you that showing love is one of the most masculine things you can do, and it's one of the hardest things that you can absolutely do. Love that's not put into action is dead. Just like we read earlier, faith that's not put into action is dead. Love that's not put into action is love that sits in a cistern and it becomes stagnant. It benefits no one. So your love has to be something that you pour out constantly, that you give to others. And who better to look at for an example of love than Christ himself? The passage we're going to look at, it's found in the first 3 Gospels. Specifically, I pulled out a Mark, and it's in chapter 5. Now, I'm not going to read this because it's a lengthy passage, but I'm going to summarize it for you. So, Jesus has been coming across the ocean, and he's got a large crowd of people around him. And a man named Jairus comes up to him, and he says, "My daughter is ill to the point of death. Will you come lay hands on her, and she'll be healed?" He believed that Jesus could do this. I told this a couple of weeks ago, one of these days, some simple person's going to read the Bible, actually believe it, and the rest of us will be embarrassed. He believed that Christ could go and his daughter would be healed. And Jesus, in his love for him, said, "Yes, of course I'll do that." Now, the crowd around him, they don't have a lot to do. This is the first century, and so there's not YouTube, there's not movies to go to or bowling alleys or anything like that. It kind of got boring sometimes. They said, "Hey, he's about to go heal this girl that's about to die. We're going to go check this out and see it." So he's got a lot of people around him. People are gathered. They want to see, hey, what's going to happen here? Either Jesus is going to go and this is going to be awesome, or he's going to go and he's going to be very embarrassed because nothing happens. So they're all walking along, and we know what happens. There's a woman, and everyone knows who this woman is. It's the woman who's had an issue of blood. She's had uterine bleeding. This is an embarrassing illness for her to have. And she's had it for 12 years. They say that she had suffered much at the hands of doctors until she had no more money. I find it kind of humorous that Luke, who was a doctor, just conveniently left that out of his gospel. But anyway, she'd spent all of her money on doctors. She had nothing left. She was broke, and she was an outcast. If you go back and read Leviticus, start in chapter 12, read about 4 or 5 chapters, and you'll see, because she had this issue, she wasn't allowed to be around people. She wasn't allowed to be in the city. She couldn't go to the markets. She couldn't go to the synagogue. She could not touch anyone or anything. Anything that she touched became unclean. Any person that she touched became unclean. And when you become unclean, guess what? You're outcast. You have to get out of the city. And then you have to go through the ritual purification ceremonies. It's a hassle. People would not want to be around her. And everybody, it's been 12 years. They know who this woman is. If she shows her face in town, she's breaking the law. And there are people in there who are so legalistic, if they see her and they know that she'll make them unclean, guess what they're going to do? They're going to kill her. Now, bear in mind, we live in an age where largely there's equality between men and women. At that time, a woman was not very much valued. If a man came to a stream and he had his animals with him, his camels and everything, he'd send the wife first, because if the wife went out there and she fell in a hole and died in the stream, it was easier to replace her than it was to replace his camel. A decent wife could be had for an average of about 3 pots. A pot was worth quite a bit of money, but you could get a good wife for about 3 different pots. Now, all the 3-pot wives, they get together and they talk about the 2-pot hussy that lived down the way. But that kind of gives you a scope of what a woman was worth. So it really was not a big deal to them. If this woman came into town and they recognized her, it's not a big deal for them to pick up rocks and stone her to death. So she's taking a risk in even approaching the town, even going in among the crowds of people. It says that she approached, and I can just see her with a hood on and her head down and just praying to God that no one recognizes who she is as she crawls through the crowd. But she's thought in her mind, she knows this Jesus is different. He can heal me. He will heal me. All I have to do is get close enough. I don't even have to touch him. Just the hem of his garment is enough, and I'll be made whole. So she goes through, and somehow she gets through the crowd without being seen. And she gets up to Jesus, and she reaches out and just grabs his garment. And she feels within her in that moment, she's healed. She's healed. Now, bear in mind, we're talking about acts of love. Jesus didn't heal her out of his love. It says that she was healed out of her faith. But Jesus stops. And of course, the crowd's moving with him, so everyone's bumping into each other, and they stop, and he says, "Who touched me?" Now, I think Peter's response to this is in line with what I would say. I'm kind of sarcastic at times. I'd be like, "Jesus, look around you. Everybody's touching you. Everybody's touching you." Jesus says, no. Somebody touched me, and she knows she's been caught. Now, this woman has just been healed, but she's still that woman. She's the woman that everybody knows is dirty, that she's unclean. She can't be here. And I can see that he turns around and she finally gets up there and reveals who she is. And I can picture this in my mind. The crowd makes a circle around her because they know we can't touch her. If we touch her, we're unclean. And she's mortified. Because there are men that are standing around that are starting to pick up stones, pick up rocks. She's about to have rocks thrown at her until she is dead. And she tells Jesus, "I was sick. I touched your garment. I'm healed now. You've made me whole." But she's about to die. Was it worth it? She touched that garment. She's about to die. And then Jesus does something, because Jesus is the man of perfect love. Jesus looks at her and he calls her something he does not call anybody else in Scripture. He looks at her and he says, "Daughter, your faith has made you well. Go in peace and be healed." Daughter. Daughter is a term of ownership. Jesus puts himself out there in a big way. He looks at this woman and he said, "She's mine. She's mine, and none of you are going to touch her. You touch her, you're going to deal with me." Now, we've got a view of Jesus a lot of times. I love Sunday school, but sometimes we get a pretty skewed view of things from it. Because a lot of times we see Jesus and he's this kind of small, wimpy looking guy. He's always got a white robe on, blue sash, sometimes red, if you're wrong. But anyway, and he glows like a dollar store nightlight. He's beautiful, and he's white, which I think is funny because he's a first century Jew. But anyway, but we have a very wrong view of what Jesus looks like. Jesus was probably about 5.5 feet tall. He's shorter than I am. And Jesus grew up as a carpenter. Not a carpenter in the fashion that we are with power tools and everything else. Jesus would go out and cut down trees by hand. They would plane them down by hand, carry these giant logs in, him and Joseph, and they would work them by hand. Jesus was not a little shrimpy man. Doing all those things, Jesus was jacked. He's a big dude. Not a guy that you want to mess with. We look at him today and we see someone that's small and weak, and he's like, "Blessed are the meek." No. Whenever you see Jesus, Jesus is a formidable character. He's someone that can hold his own if he has to. Now, of course, he drove out a whole bunch of people from the temple with a rope. Are you going to run from someone who's tiny who has a rope? No, you're going to take it away from him. But Jesus is big enough, no one's going to mess with him if you actually make him mad. Think more along the lines of a Marine as opposed to, I don't know what to call him without being offensive. So you get the point, though. There are some who even believe that we've mistranslated carpenter, and he might have actually been a stonemason, which is even more hardcore than that. So Jesus looks at her and he says, daughter, you're mine. Nobody here is going to mess with you. Jesus has put himself out there, though, because those people easily could have turned to him and said, all right, take him out too. He's going to stand in the way of the law. He's going to stand in the way of justice. We've all got to go be ritually purified now. We've got to go be cleansed. He's standing in the way of that. Throw him in there with her. He put himself out there. Jesus' ministry could have ended right there as a sacrifice for that woman, and it still would have been an incredible life. Out of his love, he did that. How far are you willing to go for love? How far will you go to show the love that God's put in you to other people? This is who Jesus really is. What's your verb? What do you do? How do you show the world who you are? Front of your bulletin. Pull it out if you got one. This was so convenient because I didn't tell anyone I was doing this. But on the front it says, John 13:35, by this all men will know that you're my disciples if you have love for one another. Our actions are rooted and grounded in Christ, in his love. Two greatest commands, love God and love your neighbor as yourself. Love does things. When you love God, you serve him. When you love your fellow man, you do things for them. You get out there and you put action to your words. There's someone sitting in this audience who has, I'm not going to point them out because I don't want to embarrass them, but has recently put themselves on the line like this. And they didn't know I was going to say this. But this person stood up for someone, and I'm sorry, you might cover your kids' ears for this, but stood up for someone who the rest of us would look at and say, that's a crack whore. A person that is marginalized by society who most of us would look at and would say, I'm not touching you. I'm not going near you. You got problems. You got issues. And this person stood up, stood in the gap for this woman at their own personal expense. Stand in the gap. It's a military term. Cities used to have walls around them, especially over in the old world. And when a city would be attacked, eventually a wall would get breached. And the term stand in the gap meant that the soldier, instead of trying to rebuild the wall, would physically put themselves in harm's way to cover that gap. It's a death sentence. It's suicide to stand there. But they would stand up to protect those that they love, to protect them and theirs. What prevents us from acting? What prevents us from going out there and putting ourselves out there in love for others, in doing for others, not just small, meaningless acts, but things that actually will make a difference in people's lives? Well, I'll tell you, there's three things in general that we look at whenever we go say, well, I don't really want to go do that. Number one, it might hurt. Number two, we might run out of money. And three, we might die. Okay, let's just address these right quick. Number one, it might hurt. Everyone experiences pain. And I'm going to challenge you this morning and tell you, pain is actually a blessing. There's a medical condition that very few people are born with, but where they absolutely feel no pain. These people never live out of their teenage years. You know why? Because things happen to them and they don't realize it. They get grievous injuries and have no clue that it's happened. Their appendix will burst and they have no idea and they'll die. They'll get a terrible infection that would put you and I in excruciating pain. They have no idea what's going on and it just takes over their body and they die. God has put pain in our lives as a signal. And even though it's unpleasant, it's something that refines us, it protects us, and it makes us better. We're going to experience pain, physical pain, emotional pain. That's part of the fall of man. That's part of living in this world. Is your pain going to mean something, though? Is it going to be something that you make as a sacrifice to the Lord for someone else? Or is it going to be something that is completely dependent, something that only benefits you? Number two, I might run out of money. This one makes me laugh. Because guess what? You can't take it with you. And eventually, that's fine. I know some people who live in absolute fear. It's so sad of getting old and running out of money. They say, well, I have to save so much, and I'm budgeting that, I'm going to live until I'm 75, and then that'll be about it. But I want to be able to have a comfortable life. I have to have enough money to get there. God says, look at the lilies of the valley. They neither harvest, they don't reap, they don't sow, and yet even Solomon in all his splendor was not clothed as beautifully as one of these. God says, don't worry about the money. If you run out, I'll take care of you. And guess what? If you run out and nothing's there, you don't eat for 30 days and then you go see God. How's that a bad thing? Really? In giving, I wasn't going to say this, but this is off script, by the way. But I'm going to anyway. I watched a guy on YouTube, and he does a lot of social experiments and everything. And he did an experiment where he dressed up like a hobo, and he just sat down on the side of the street at a place where a lot of business people walk by. And he had a sign, and it said, "Nobody ever went poor by giving." And whenever someone in a suit would walk by, he'd say, "Hey, mister," and they'd say, "Oh, sorry, I don't have any money." And he said, No, you don't understand. And he pulled out a $10 bill, and he said, "I have everything I need. I wanted to give this to you." And the reactions are astounding. It's incredible because so many people get mad at him because he says, "I have everything I need. I just want to bless your day." One guy went so far as to say, "You see that car over there? That's a Mercedes-Benz C-Class. I have this kind of job. I make this kind of money." And he's like, "Dude, you need to humble yourself. It's not about the kind of money you have. It's about what you do for other people." He gets it. This man's a Muslim, by the way, which was interesting to me. But he gets it. What you do is you give to others. One lady came by and she said, "I'm sorry, I have no money." And he said, No, I wanted to give you some, bless your morning. I have everything I need. And she said, "Oh, sweetie, that's the nicest thing I've ever seen. Let me go buy you breakfast." And then he told her, "You're on a hidden camera show." And I was doing this, revealed that, he's actually probably got more money than she does. But it was interesting. He put himself out there. But our money, the more that we give, the better off life is. God said in Malachi, "Test me in this." It's the one time in the Bible God says to test me. See if you can outgive me and see if I don't open the floodgates of heaven and bless your life for it. Wow. Do you really want to get in a competition with God? You're not going to win, but see how much you can do. I was listening to a sermon this week, a guy who had started a ministry, and he said, "We figured out that we needed $5,000 a month to run this ministry." And he said, in the months where we would come up short, where we didn't have enough come in, I might have $4,000. He said, instead of trying to, send out letters to say we need just a little bit more, he said we would take that $4,000 and we would give every cent of it away. It's the dumbest business plan ever. And he said, never once did we miss a bill. Because every time that we would take and give away, he said we were sowing into the kingdom of God, and God would pour right back into us, and everything somehow, some way would be taken care of. The economics of God are not the economics of man. Your money's borrowed anyway. God's given it to you in this earth. Don't let that be a limiting factor for how you go and bless others. And the last one, I might die. I'll give you a statistic, and this is the only one you have in the morning. Write this down. 1 out of 1 dies. Pretty simple. On a long enough timeline, the survival for everybody is going to drop to 0. There have been 2 people in the history of the world who we know of that didn't die, and you're not one of those 2. Sorry about you. You're not. Watched a show about a doctor once, and he said, everything we do is a stall for the inevitable. Everybody in a long enough timeline is going to die. If you embrace that and you realize death is not something to be feared, but something to be looked forward to because of what we have waiting for us, my goodness, how much does that open up what you can do in life? Personally, I don't want to grow old and die of nothing in particular. I would rather go out doing so much good for Jesus. I would this would be awesome. I would save so much, or I wouldn't. My parents would save so much on a funeral expense. If I could go out and just do so much good for Jesus, I'd just explode. That's it. That's how I'm gone. They could bury me in a file folder. It'd be fantastic. Just, you're done. Is your death going to be something that is meaningful? Are you going to die of nothing in particular, or will it mean something? How great would it be if you could give your life, and because of the life that you gave, someone else was saved? that whenever you get up to heaven, that person comes up and they say, your sacrifice meant something because guess what? I was saved from the pits of hell because of that sacrifice that you made. Are you going to put your love into action? This is not an easy lesson this morning. I see a few people out here looking at me this morning, and it's kind of a deer in the headlights look. I'm serious, though. And it doesn't matter what your age is. You guys right here, it's as applicable for you as it is for the oldest person in here. I'm not pointing that person out because I want to live beyond today if I can. Christ calls us to go out into the world and to be salt and light. Salt's an interesting thing. Salt changes things. I use salt as an indicator in the job that I do. We see how concentrated water is based on salt because salt does not break down in the presence of other chemicals. Salt is steadfast and firm. And people are pretty polarized about salt. When you go into a restaurant and you order a dish, you taste it, you know for sure, or you know one way or the other for sure that you do or do not want salt in that dish. If you get mashed potatoes and you taste them, you know if you want more salt in them, and you know if you don't. What about your coffee? Chris? Do you want salt in your coffee? You're polarized on this. When you go out and you're a salt to the world, there are people who are going to grab onto that and they're going to say, yes, I want that. But there are also people out there who are going to reject that love of Christ. That doesn't mean that you don't go out there anyway. That's not an excuse to not put yourself out there. Christ has called us to a higher calling, and it's above and beyond who we are. If you're comfortable just coming to church on Sundays, possibly on Wednesdays if you're not doing too much, think about it. Are you a well or are you a cistern? But if you come in the morning to be filled and then you're going out and you are giving everything that you've got, think of the impact that you're making, the people that you are pouring life into. You are a wellspring of life that Jesus talks about in John. You are the one that people draw life from. They see Christ in you. And it's not us that's doing it. It's the love of Him. It's all about His love that we allow to well up and pour out of us. Is this scary? Yeah, it can be. But guess what? 1 John 4:18 says, there is no fear in love, but perfect love casts out fear. Guys, we don't have to be fearful of man. We don't have to be fearful of governments. We don't have to be fearful of what's going on in the world. Do you want to change the world? Go out and show love. You've watched the news. You've read the bulletin, the things that have gone on this last week. There's a lot of hate out there right now. It's sad. It's our job to change the world. And the way that we do that is through the love of Christ. Start small. Start with your own family. And then move out to your neighbors, those around you, your coworkers. He doesn't call everyone to stand up on a platform and present to hundreds of thousands of people. Start with those around you. The way we change the world is one life at a time. Let's go out there. This is a call. This isn't a call for you just to sit there and be comfortable anymore. We don't live in a world where comfort is an option. If you're obsessed with your own comfort, you're a cistern, you're not a well. Put yourself out there. Let's go change the world. How great would it be if in 10 years, people could trace back and they'd say, there's a little church in Lubbock called Vandelia Church of Christ, where people showed so much love, it radiated out to an entire city, which then overflowed into an entire state, which transformed a nation, which transformed the world. My goodness, you can do that. That is the power of Christ's love in each one of us. Let's get out there and collide with the world and make a change for the better. No fear. Fear is not an option. Let's go do this.